Thank you. We have a question from Doris Landaverde, who is asking why Harvard is not willing to give a sexual harassment and discrimination protection in the contract. And Shireen mentioned this a little earlier. So Shireen, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that issue and if you have any thoughts on Harvard's response to it.
Thank you. I would like to ask someone who's on the bargaining committee to also respond, but as far as I know, this has really been a part of HGSU-UAW's campaign from the beginning, and there's also a wing that's specifically about civil rights issues. So I don't know why it's such an issue, but I know that it's one of the issues where the university hasn't budged since the beginning.
So I think it's fairly straightforward when you have arbitration for non-discrimination cases, you have an outsider with an authority. And I think the administration does not want to have their decisions questioned. But maybe they're willing to do so for less sensitive topics like a workload complaint. But when it comes to discrimination, they want to be able to make decisions themselves. The problem is that workload complaints, other sort of regular workload issues are often bound up with discrimination as well. And so you cannot just simply separate these issues. But it's really about having control. And student workers deserve to have someone who can actually observe a situation sort of independently and neutrally that's not funded by solely by the university or employed at the university to make a judgment about whether discrimination did occur and what should be done about it.
Yeah, and we have a related point from Carly about wondering about how this situation is exacerbating existing disparities in academia. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, there are a lot of factors that cause these disparities in terms of gender and sexual orientation and gender identity, as well as racial disparities, disparities on economic background in academia, and all of them are being exacerbated by this crisis. And you can see in the chat, Carly posted a link to an article specifically about research productivity among women scientists during this crisis. And I think that is something that really needs to be looked at, and especially if it's because of issues around childcare, that's certainly something that needs to be addressed in a holistic manner by the university and needs to be addressed all the time, not just in a pandemic, as Justin had mentioned. And the same thing with harassment and discrimination. These issues become heightened during a pandemic. We're already seeing harassment based on race because of this pandemic in a lot of realms of the world. And so it's even more important than ever to have protections against harassment and discrimination that really have some weight behind them.
May I add to that just briefly?
Please.
I think also on a more, just at the most pragmatic, practical level, I've heard from my colleagues who are teaching where before they had a single or two sections, multiple sections to accommodate for different time zones, who are reaching out and finding exceptional measures for reaching out to students who either have limited internet access or have no internet access, right? And this idea that we can continue to the semester as if everything is okay and that everything is returning to normal, when there are still students of ours or grad student workers who have precarious access or no access to the internet, I think again will exacerbate socioeconomic and also generally these map onto racial or gender lines as well. And so, you know, this idea that we can revert back in a situation of exception like we have here in the pandemic, I think it speaks to the general lack of understanding of the very precarious situations that a lot of our students and a lot of grad student workers themselves are in.
Thank you. Yeah,